Unbeatable is a 2025 rhythm adventure game where music is illegal and you do crimes. Okay, but seriously, I love Unbeatable, but this isn't going to be a review of it. If you want a review, here it is. A great game. No notes. Except maybe these ones. But I just want to take a look at how the game handles creativity and the creation of art itself, both in terms of playing through the game and the game's story, and the story of how the game came to be in the first place. Unbeatable started development way back in 2018 as an after-school project by Jeffrey Chow and Andrew Tsai, who just felt like making a rhythm game. The problem with making a rhythm game, though, is that it needs music. A lot more than any other game needs music. And neither of them were composers. So they did what anybody would do in this situation. They asked Reddit for help. This single Reddit post is what sent the entire project into motion. Several key members of the entire project joined through responding to this post. One of the most notable is RJ Lake, who originally joined the project as nothing more than a composer, but as the project gradually ballooned in size, he wound up taking on the role of co-director. Though the team always stayed relatively small, from what I can tell it never really reached any more than 30 people working in-house at once, though that doesn't account for any outside contractors. And with a team that small, everyone was kind of wearing multiple different hats at once.
Any one of the people you'd be fighting against would look like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I came on to help lighten Andrew's workload on the programming side, so he could focus on
the art and all of the other things.
Yeah. You're still wearing a lot of hats, to be fair, but you have one less now.
I have one less.
Originally, Unbeatable was only gonna have like 5 or 6 songs and be sold for like no more than $5. But RJ Lake just really liked the character designs that they'd made for it, so he kept pushing for them to just do something more with the game. And that just kept spiraling and spiraling and spiraling, and now look what we've got. The earliest images I could find of the characters were from Unbeatable's first ever public showing at MagFest in 2019, with this incredibly basic footage. It's kind of weird to actually look at this footage. It's definitely, unmistakably still Unbeatable, but it's also very different to what we would eventually see. Really, it's just fascinating to see how the project has evolved over time. Back in 2021, after an overwhelmingly successful Kickstarter campaign, the team did a few interviews and went into detail about the project and their ambitions for it. Story details are understandably scarce, aside from the tagline, which, as far as I can tell, remained the same throughout the whole of development. But one of the biggest things that was changed a lot before release is the life management aspect. At the time, Unbeatable was going to be structured in a way that's described as something similar to a Persona game, with daytime being for side quests, exploring the world, doing band practice, whilst the evenings would typically be for playing your underground gigs and advancing your status and progressing as a band.
And that system is going to make up the bulk of the narrative content of the game, wherein, you have performances that you put on, but the things that you do between those performances are going to determine what the characters are thinking, what they're going to be, the kind, like where their story arcs lead, the kind of music that you'll be able to play, that you'll be writing, and all of this kind of ties together with an overarching narrative.
But in the final game that was released, we barely see any of this. But that doesn't mean these ideas didn't make it into Unbeatable, though they are a lot more restrained. The day-night cycle only happens during episode 4, which is only about 2 hours long. Similarly, in those interviews, the team also talked about how Beat could experience exhaustion if the player tried to do too much in a short time, and then that would affect their performance during live shows. This idea also stayed in the final game, but instead of being something that would punish the player for doing too much, it's baked into the game's plot as something that happens no matter what you do. Now, Unbeatable is far from the first game to have features changed or removed from reveal to release, but it is an interesting example to look at for that. The game's story, amongst many other things, is about wanting to create art and why we do it. Each member of the main cast has their reasons for wanting to make music despite it being illegal. Quaver does it as something to help her remember her mother by. Treble and Clef do it as acts of rebellion to show their disdain for the government. And then there's Beat, who spends a lot of the story just trying to figure out why she wants to do it and help herself come to terms with that. But despite their reasons all being so different, that drive, that passion to create art is still something that unites them. That drive, that urge for creativity is something that is constantly aiding and pushing them to grow their friendship together, as well as themselves. And there are so many more reasons, I just kind of touched on the gist of them here. But regardless of their reasoning, that creativity, that drive, unites them. That passion encourages them to work with each other to create something greater than just simply what they would have made individually. And that collaboration throughout the entire creative process is something that fuels and aids in the growth of their friendships. But that passion about what you love and what you love doing can also have negative effects too. The members of Unbeatable argue over what's best for the band, what's best for the music, what's best for the art. And those clashes can get intense at times and they can hurt a lot. But it's also through some of those arguments that they can also gain newfound respect for each other, because they know by the end of it that they're doing it because they care, even if they don't always see that at the time. And some of these same arguments can happen during the making of any piece of art. In a more recent interview in 2025, members of the team at D-Cell did admit that some arguments happened about the game's direction, and that those arguments could get quite intense. But at the same time, they also acknowledge how those arguments can be turned around into being a good thing. They can help erase notions that other members of the team don't care. They can help identify what's most important to other members of the team. And through doing that, you can better understand other team members' points of view, and through that you can gain more respect for them, more respect for what they want to achieve out of the project. And it's clear that the characters in Unbeatable and the members of D-Cell who helped bring them to life all gained an appreciation for each other through their shared love of creating art, especially after some of those more intense arguments. Looking at the final game and comparing it to what the team talked about making, I'm going to take an educated guess and say that a lot of those stressful arguments probably revolved around the scaling down of the project in a lot of ways. A lot of character designs and locations seem to have gone unused. The day-night cycle and the life management elements are all drastically pared back. But in spite of this, it's clear that the developers are still trying their best to get as close to that original vision as they possibly can. The Unbeatable that we got in 2025 still has the exact same core as the Unbeatable that the developers wanted to make in 2021. The 2-button rhythm gameplay is a more refined version of what we saw in the white label demo side game thing back in 2021, and we could say the same for the art style as well. In an interview from June 2021, Jeffrey Chow described how they wanted the visuals to emulate what it was like to watch a pirated anime VHS on the 12-inch CRT TV they had in their childhood bedroom. And you can see that reflected all over Unbeatable. The VHS artifacting that's typically on screen, the warm glow that seems to radiate off of anywhere the sunlight touches, and all of the character designs and the architecture of the world itself. Time was clearly put into understanding the minute details of every single asset. And in order to properly emulate something like this, you need to put time into understanding it. Not just looking at it and enjoying it, but really breaking it down into its individual components, understanding why they look like that, why it feels like that to look at it. And it's through understanding something on this level that you can truly come to appreciate it, to love it. And it's that love which pushes you to spend years of your life making something that is, in many ways, a tribute to it. But Unbeatable isn't just a love letter to the time spent in your childhood bedroom. Andrew Tsai described it as the following. Unbeatable is a coming-of-age story and a narrative where they are sort of coming to terms with adulthood and adolescence and what it really means to be a creative soul in a world that doesn't value creativity. And the part about Unbeatable being a coming-of-age story makes a lot of sense. This game first started development when the project's founders were in high school. In many ways, they were still coming of age, as the characters being written here were. It's a project that has matured along with them. But isn't that something that happens with all projects on this scale? Nowadays, the average AAA game takes like 5 years to develop. Unbeatable took even longer. Think back to what you were like 5 years ago. Were you as mature then as you are now? Probably not. And that's good. We're meant to mature and grow as people as we grow older. And our art can function as a sort of snapshot of who we were at that moment in time. But it can also encapsulate what makes us who we are, be it our experiences, our relationships, even other art that influenced us. Maybe the parts of Unbeatable that were scaled down were never feasibly possible. But maybe the contrast between wanting to make a game one way and ending up making it another way simply because you couldn't is a reflection of how the dev team matured during that long development time. In 2021, when the Kickstarter had finished, the developers were talking with so much passion about this game. It's clear they believed in the project, and it's clear they still do, otherwise it wouldn't have come out in the first place. But as you learn more and as time changes, things that were possible become impossible, and things that were impossible become possible. But the people who thought that was possible are still here. They're newer, hopefully better versions of themselves, but they are still here. They still have that same creative force driving them. And it's that process of learning about your inspirations that helps you learn about yourself. It helps you grow because you learn to appreciate new things that you may have never realised were there. Creating art isn't just about making something and releasing it into the world for others to enjoy. It's about conveying something to the fictional voice inside of your head that just wants to understand everything. That can be something you love, something you're afraid of, something you despise. And if what you put in ends up confusing or distorting that message, then it's fine to change or remove some of it. If you realise you've bitten off more than you can chew, it's fine to step back and re-examine what's best for the art. Just as long as a piece of you remains in the art itself. Because it's that piece of you that will resonate with others. It's that piece of you that changes something from simply being content into truly being art.
Kiss me